Everyone ignores the little girl falling. Only the cleaner helps, not knowing her father is a CEO. Before we begin this beautiful story, like the video and subscribe to the channel. Tell us where you're watching from, and if you believe in second chances, type Amen. The crystal chandelier cast dancing shadows across the marble floor of the penthouse suite, as Manhattan's skyline stretched endlessly through floor-to-ceiling windows. The luxury apartment on the 11th floor of the prestigious Hartford building had been transformed into a corporate battlefield where million-dollar deals were sealed with handshakes and champagne that cost more per bottle than most people earned in a month. 23 of New York's most powerful executives filled the spacious living room, their Armani suits and Hermes accessories gleaming under the afternoon light that streamed through windows worth more than entire houses. The air buzzed with the electricity of high-stakes business negotiations, punctuated by the soft clinking of crystal glasses from baccarat and the subtle hum of air conditioning that kept the temperature perfect at exactly 68 degrees Fahrenheit. "Where the hell is Mitchell?" growled Richard Blackwood, adjusting his platinum cufflinks as he checked his limited edition Rolex Submariner for the third time in 5 minutes. The merger between Mitchell Industries and Blackwood Enterprises was the biggest deal of the quarter, worth over $8 billion and involving 17 different international subsidiaries. He was just here with his daughter, then disappeared when that emergency Tokyo call came in. Said it was make or break for the semiconductor deal, and he couldn't delay it even 5 minutes. This was supposed to start 20 minutes ago. Victoria Sterling, her auburn hair pulled back in a severe bun, secured with a diamond-encrusted hairpin, scrolled through her tablet with manicured nails, painted in Chanel's signature red. He had to take the call in his private office. Something about the semiconductor acquisition that's been in negotiation for 8 months. Said he'd be back in 10 minutes. That was 30 minutes ago. She didn't look up from her screen, her voice carrying the sharp edge of someone who viewed time as the most expensive commodity in a world where seconds translated to millions. The other executives nodded knowingly, their own phones buzzing constantly with stock alerts, market updates and messages from board members across 3 continents. In their rarefied world of international finance, a delayed meeting meant lost opportunities, and lost opportunities meant millions slipping through their fingers like sand through an hourglass that never stopped running. None of them noticed the small figure playing quietly in the corner of the opulent room. 7-year-old Grace Mitchell sat cross-legged on the hand-woven Persian rug that had been crafted by master artisans in Isfahan, her golden curls catching the afternoon light as she carefully arranged a collection of colorful building blocks. Her white dress with tiny blue flowers remained spotless despite her active play, and her bright blue eyes, the same shade as her father's, sparkled with the innocent joy that only children possess when completely absorbed in their imagination. She hummed softly to herself, a melody she had learned from her nanny back at their Fifth Avenue penthouse, completely absorbed in creating a miniature city with her blocks. Each piece was placed with the careful precision of an architect, her small hands displaying the same attention to detail that had made her father one of the most successful developers in North America. "Daddy promised we'd go to Central Park after his meeting," she whispered to her favorite teddy bear, Mr. Buttons, who sat patiently beside her construction project like a faithful guardian. The worn brown bear had been her constant companion since her 3rd birthday, and his missing left eye, lost during an adventure in their Hamptons beach house, gave him a distinguished worldly appearance that Grace found comforting during these long adult gatherings. The adults continued their animated conversations about market projections, quarterly reports, and international regulatory changes, their voices growing louder and more agitated as frustration mounted over Alexander Mitchell's extended absence. When the critical Tokyo call came in, threatening to collapse an 8-month negotiation if not taken immediately, He had reluctantly stepped into his adjacent private office and specifically asked them to keep an eye on Grace for just a few minutes. It's an emergency. Not one of them had glanced toward the corner where she played since then, as if children were simply invisible in their world of corporate conquest and financial domination. "The merger documents need to be signed today," declared Marcus Chen, his voice tight with anxiety as he adjusted his wire-rimmed glasses and loosened his silk tie that bore the logo of his Harvard Business School. "The board meeting is tomorrow morning at precisely 8 o'clock. The Tokyo markets open in 6 hours, and we have regulatory deadlines in 3 different countries. We can't afford any more delays without triggering penalty clauses." Grace looked up hopefully each time someone mentioned her father's name, her innocent expression reflecting the disappointment of a child who had already spent too many afternoons waiting for adult business to conclude. The executives remained focused on their screens and documents, treating her presence as background noise in their symphony of corporate urgency. 27 floors below, in the employee break room of the Hartford Hotel that smelled of industrial coffee and cleaning supplies, Carmen Rivera tied her long black hair into a neat ponytail and checked her reflection in the small mirror above the sink. Her dark brown eyes showed the determination of someone who had worked tirelessly to build a better life in America, leaving everything familiar behind for the promise of opportunity. At 27, she had been cleaning the luxury suites of the Hartford for 3 years, sending most of her earnings back to her family in Brazil while saving every penny possible for nursing school at the Community College of New York. Her mother cared for her 8-year-old daughter Isabella in a small apartment in São Paulo. Isabella had been 6 when Carmen made the heartbreaking decision to leave Brazil, and every day without her felt like an eternity measured in sacrifice and hope. "Carmen, the penthouse suite on 11 needs a complete setup refresh," called her supervisor Janet Morrison from the doorway, her clipboard thick with the day's assignments. "Some corporate event running late. They want fresh flowers, clean glasses, the conference table polished to mirror finish, and the ice sculptures replaced. Should take about 45 minutes if you work efficiently." Carmen nodded professionally, gathering her supplies with the practiced efficiency that had earned her recognition as one of the hotel's most reliable staff members. She had cleaned dozens of these high-powered business meetings, always maintaining the invisible presence that wealthy clients preferred, while ensuring every detail remained absolutely perfect. The service elevator hummed quietly as it carried Carmen to the 11th floor, her cart loaded with fresh linens that had been pressed that morning, premium cleaning supplies imported from Germany, and arrangements of white orchids that cost more than her weekly salary. She had learned to appreciate the beauty of these luxury spaces while never forgetting the vast divide between her world of honest work and their universe of inherited privilege. As the elevator doors opened with a soft chime, the sound of agitated voices spilled into the hallway like water through a broken dam. Carmen could hear the tension even before she reached the penthouse door, her trained ear recognizing the particular stress pattern of business deals under extreme pressure and ticking clocks. She knocked softly before entering, her presence barely registering among the suited figures who continued their heated discussions about international markets, regulatory approvals, and currency fluctuations that could make or break entire economies. The apartment was magnificent, with its panoramic city views and designer furniture selected by interior decorators who charged more per hour than Carmen earned in a month. That's when she noticed the little girl. Grace sat quietly in the corner, her small hands carefully balancing blocks as she built what appeared to be an elaborate castle with towers and bridges. The sight stopped Carmen mid-step, a warm smile crossing her face as childhood memories of her own daughter back in São Paulo flooded her thoughts like sunshine through clouds. Her daughter Isabella was 8 now, staying with Carmen's mother in their modest apartment, while Carmen worked to secure their future in a country that promised opportunity to those brave enough to seize it. The 3 years of separation since Isabella was 5 had been the hardest of Carmen's life, but she knew the sacrifice would create opportunities her daughter could never have in Brazil. Isabella had the same creative spirit, the same careful attention to detail when building with whatever toys they could afford. She's building something beautiful, Carmen thought, watching Grace's concentrated expression as she placed each block with deliberate care, her tongue poking out slightly in the universal gesture of childhood focus. The child's golden hair reminded Carmen of the American dolls Isabella had always admired in store windows, but there was something deeply real and innocent about Grace that transcended any manufactured perfection. The business discussion grew more heated as minutes ticked by, like bombs waiting to explode, with several executives openly expressing frustration about the delayed meeting that was costing them money with every passing second. Carmen worked efficiently around them, replacing flower arrangements and ensuring every surface gleamed like polished silver, but her attention kept drifting to the little girl who seemed as invisible to these powerful adults as Carmen herself. Grace looked up and caught Carmen's eye, offering a shy smile that melted the housekeeper's heart like snow in spring sunshine. In that moment, 2 worlds briefly connected across language barriers and social divides, united by the simple recognition of shared humanity that transcended wealth, status, and nationality. Outside, storm clouds began gathering over Manhattan like an approaching army, casting shadows across the luxurious apartment as the afternoon light grew dim and ominous. The meteorologists had predicted severe weather, with winds up to 60 miles per hour. But inside the climate-controlled penthouse, the gathering storm felt as distant as the lives of the working people who kept the city running. Alexander Mitchell's corporate phone continued buzzing on the conference table like an angry insect, its screen lighting up with missed calls and urgent messages from assistants, board members, and international partners who couldn't reach him in his private office, where he was trapped in the crucial conference call that would determine the fate of his Asian market expansion and potentially affect thousands of jobs. The stage was set for a collision of worlds that would reveal the true meaning of wealth, courage, and the unexpected connections that bind us all together like invisible threads in an intricate tapestry. In less than 30 minutes, the carefully ordered universe of corporate power would be shattered by a moment of pure human compassion, setting in motion events that would transform everyone involved and prove that the most valuable things in life cannot be bought, sold, or traded on any market. The grandfather clock in the corner chimed 3:30 p.m. with resonant brass notes that seemed to mock the urgency filling the air. As Carmen continued her methodical cleaning, the sound barely audible above the increasingly agitated voices of the business executives. She moved with practiced grace between the furniture pieces that cost more than most people's annual salaries, her attention split between her professional duties and periodic glances toward Grace, who remained absorbed in her elaborate block construction that grew more impressive by the minute. "This is absolutely unacceptable," Victoria Sterling snapped, her voice sharp enough to cut glass as she paced near the windows with the predatory energy of a caged leopard. "The Hong Kong markets close in 2 hours. If we don't finalize these agreements today, we're looking at a potential loss of $47 million, not to mention the domino effect on our European partnerships." Richard Blackwood loosened his silk tie that bore the subtle pattern of his family's coat of arms, sweat beading on his forehead despite the perfect air conditioning that maintained the temperature with scientific precision. "I've got 12 board members breathing down my neck like vultures. They specifically flew in from London for this signing ceremony. Mitchell better have a damn good explanation for this delay, or we're looking at a vote of no confidence." Marcus Chen frantically typed on his laptop, with fingers that moved like a concert pianist, his screens showing stock prices fluctuating in real time like a patient's vital signs during surgery. The semiconductor stocks are already dropping 3% based on rumors of our delay. We need Mitchell here now, or we're going to lose all credibility with our international partners and watch our carefully built reputation crumble. Grace looked up from her blocks, her innocent blue eyes reflecting confusion at the angry tone filling the room like toxic smoke. She clutched Mr. Buttons closer to her chest, the familiar comfort of the worn teddy bear helping to calm her nerves as the adult world seemed to spiral into chaos around her small sanctuary of imagination and play. "Daddy said he'd be back soon," she whispered to her bear, her small voice barely audible above the corporate chaos that surrounded them like a hurricane of greed and desperation. "He promised we'd build a real castle in the sandbox at the park today, with towers tall enough to touch the clouds." Carmen's heart clenched as she overheard the child's innocent words, spoken with the pure faith that only children possess before life teaches them that promises are sometimes as fragile as soap bubbles. She remembered making similar promises to her own daughter Isabella before leaving Brazil 3 years ago, promises about building a better life that sometimes felt as fragile as Grace's block castle when homesickness threatened to overwhelm her resolve. The parallel between her situation and this little girl's wasn't lost on her, despite the vast difference in their circumstances. One child waiting for a father who built financial empires, another waiting for a mother who cleaned them. Both were caught in the gravitational pull of adult ambitions that left little room for childhood's simple needs. The housekeeper continued polishing the massive mahogany conference table that had been carved from a single tree in the Amazon rainforest, its surface so perfectly reflective that she could see the worried expressions of the executives mirrored in its gleaming finish. 23 of the most powerful people in New York surrounded this table, yet none of them seemed to notice the small person who needed attention most. "Carmen, could you refresh the ice buckets?" called Janet Morrison from the hallway, her supervisor's voice carrying the authoritative tone that brooked no delay or discussion. "These guests are getting restless, and we need everything perfect. The hotel's reputation depends on flawless service, especially for clients of this caliber." "Of course, Mrs. Morrison," Carmen replied in her carefully practiced English, though her accent still carried the warm melody of her Brazilian heritage like music from a distant shore. She had worked tirelessly to improve her language skills, taking evening classes at the community college whenever her exhausting work schedule permitted, studying by candlelight to save money on electricity. As Carmen wheeled her cart toward the kitchen area, she passed directly by Grace's play corner, where the little girl had created an impressive architectural masterpiece that would have made her father proud. The castle featured towers reaching nearly 3 feet high and intricate bridges connecting different sections of her imaginary kingdom like a miniature version of the financial empire her father was building. "That's beautiful, sweetheart," Carmen said softly, crouching down to Grace's eye level with a genuine smile that lit up her face. "You're a very talented architect. This castle could house 100 fairy tale characters comfortably." Grace's face lit up like sunrise breaking over the ocean, her expression transforming from lonely confusion to pure joy at receiving acknowledgement from an adult who actually saw her as more than furniture. "Thank you. It's a castle for princesses and dragons to live together peacefully. Mr. Buttons is the king of this tower." She pointed to the tallest structure, where her teddy bear sat regally like a monarch surveying his domain. "A peaceful kingdom," Carmen mused, her voice warm with admiration and tinged with the wistfulness of someone who had seen too much conflict in the world. "That's a wonderful idea. The world could use more places like that, where different creatures live in harmony instead of fighting over territory and treasure." For a brief moment, The chaos of the business meeting faded into background noise as two souls connected across language and cultural barriers that seemed as insignificant as lines drawn on maps. Carmen saw in Grace's bright eyes the same creative spark she cherished in her own daughter, while Grace found in Carmen's gentle attention the nurturing presence she craved from adults too busy conquering the world to notice a little girl's needs. "My daddy builds buildings too," Grace explained proudly, adding another block to her creation with the precision of a master craftsman. "But his are much bigger and made of steel and glass, and they don't have any dragons. I think dragons would make them more interesting, don't you? They could help people instead of scaring them." Carmen laughed softly, the sound as musical as wind chimes dancing in a summer breeze. "Dragons definitely make everything more interesting. Perhaps your daddy could learn something from your designs. Sometimes the most important innovations come from seeing the world through fresh eyes." The moment of connection was interrupted by Victoria Sterling's sharp voice, cutting through the air like a blade forged from frustration and entitlement. "Where is that housekeeper? We need fresh beverages immediately. This heat is becoming unbearable, and these delays are making everyone irritable." Carmen straightened quickly, her professional demeanor sliding back into place like armor protecting her from the casual dismissal of people who viewed service workers as extensions of the furniture. "I'll get the ice right away," she called, then whispered to Grace, "Keep building your peaceful kingdom, little princess. I'll be right back to see what new wonders you've created." In the kitchen area, Carmen worked efficiently to prepare fresh ice and arrange new beverage options on silver trays that reflected her face like funhouse mirrors. Through the service window, she could see the executives growing more agitated by the minute, their expensive suits and watches unable to mask their increasing desperation as millions of dollars hung in the balance of their absent colleagues' arrival. Meanwhile, the afternoon thunderstorm that had been threatening Manhattan finally began to make its presence known, with the dramatic flair of nature asserting its authority over human plans. Dark clouds rolled across the sky outside the floor-to-ceiling windows like an invading army, and the first drops of rain began pattering against the glass with increasing intensity. The weather matched the mood inside the penthouse perfectly, with tension building like atmospheric pressure before a major storm that would either bring relief or destruction. The contrast between the climate-controlled luxury and the raw power of nature created an almost surreal atmosphere, as if two different worlds were colliding in slow motion. Grace, oblivious to both the corporate drama and the approaching weather, continued expanding her block castle with the focus of an artist completely absorbed in her masterpiece. She had started building a section that extended toward the windows, where the natural light made the colored blocks shimmer, like jewels in a treasure chest, creating rainbows that danced across the marble floor. "This will be the garden," she announced to Mr. Buttons, creating a courtyard area with green and blue blocks arranged in patterns that suggested flowers and fountains. "The princesses can have tea parties here when the weather is nice, and the dragons can sunbathe on the walls and tell stories about their adventures in faraway lands." The business executives remained completely absorbed in their crisis management, phones buzzing constantly with updates from international markets and urgent messages from board members who demanded explanations for delays that threatened carefully orchestrated financial strategies. Not one of them noticed that Grace had moved closer to the windows, her block construction now extending into an area that put her within arm's reach of the tall glass doors leading to the balcony. Alexander Mitchell's phone, still abandoned on the conference table like a silent witness to his absence, continued to light up with missed calls that painted a picture of mounting pressure. His assistant's increasingly frantic voicemails told the story of a man trapped in a conference call with Tokyo executives, unable to break away without jeopardizing a crucial acquisition that had taken months to negotiate and involved the livelihoods of thousands of workers across 2 continents. Carmen returned with the refreshments, distributing cold drinks to the agitated executives who barely acknowledged her presence, treating her like a ghost that materialized to serve their needs before vanishing back into invisibility. Her trained eye automatically scanned the room for any details that needed attention, but her gaze lingered longest on Grace, who had moved her play area dangerously close to the balcony access. The lightning grew more frequent outside the penthouse windows, casting dramatic shadows across the marble floor as the storm intensified over Manhattan with the fury of nature unleashed. Thunder rolled across the sky like a distant avalanche, and the rain had transformed from gentle drops to a steady downpour that streaked the glass like tears from heaven itself, creating rivers that obscured the city view. Grace pressed her face closer to the window, her small hands leaving tiny handprints on the surface as she watched the magnificent light show with wide-eyed wonder that only children possess when witnessing nature's raw power. "Look, mister." "Buttons," she whispered to her teddy bear, her breath fogging the glass. "The sky is having a party with lights and music. Maybe the thunder is the dragons singing." Carmen finished arranging the refreshment table with military precision and glanced toward Grace's corner, her maternal radar immediately detecting the change in the child's position that sent alarm bells ringing through her consciousness. The little girl had moved even closer to the balcony doors, her block castle now extending to within inches of the glass entrance that led to the outdoor terrace 15 floors above the bustling street. "The Brazilian markets are hemorrhaging money while we sit here waiting like impotent fools," Richard Blackwood snarled into his phone, his face flushed red with frustration that made his veins bulge like roadmaps of rage. "Tell the São Paulo office to hold all transactions until we get confirmation from Mitchell, and prepare contingency plans for complete withdrawal from the South American sector." Victoria Sterling stabbed at her tablet screen with aggressive precision, her perfectly manicured nails clicking against the glass like castanets in a flamenco performance of fury. "The London Consortium is threatening to pull out entirely and take their $3 billion elsewhere. They're calling this delay unprofessional and unacceptable. And frankly, I'm beginning to agree with their assessment of our organization's reliability." Marcus Chen had abandoned all pretense of calm professionalism, sweat staining his expensive shirt as he juggled 3 different phone calls simultaneously like a circus performer whose act was falling apart in real time. "The Tokyo acquisition is falling apart like a house of cards. The semiconductor deal is in jeopardy, and our stock price has dropped 12 points in the last hour. This is a complete disaster that will make headlines in tomorrow's financial papers." The corporate panic filled the air like toxic smoke from a financial apocalypse, but Grace remained blissfully unaware of the adult drama surrounding her small world of imagination and play. She had discovered that she could see her reflection in the window and was making faces at herself while Mr. Buttons watched from his perch on her block castle like a patient guardian angel. "I wonder what's on the other side," Grace mused, her curiosity naturally drawn to the mysterious space beyond the glass doors that beckoned like a portal to adventure. She had noticed the beautiful outdoor terrace during previous visits to her father's business meetings, but had never been allowed to explore it, always told it was too dangerous or not for children. Carmen's attention was torn between her cleaning duties and the growing unease she felt watching Grace's proximity to the balcony entrance, like watching a candle flame dance too close to curtains. The child's innocent exploration was heading in a direction that made Carmen's stomach clench with worry, but the social dynamics of the situation left her uncertain about how to intervene without overstepping boundaries that could cost her everything. The hotel's staff training had been explicit about maintaining professional boundaries with guests, especially prominent business clients whose complaints could end careers with a single phone call. Interfering with a guest's child could result in immediate dismissal, and Carmen couldn't afford to lose this job that represented her family's lifeline to a better future. But watching Grace edge closer to potential danger triggered every protective instinct Carmen possessed, instincts honed by years of caring for her own daughter across an ocean of separation. Her own daughter, Isabella, was only a year older than this little girl, and the thought of any child being in harm's way made her heart race with anxiety that threatened to overwhelm her professional restraint. Grace's small fingers traced patterns on the glass door, like an artist sketching her next masterpiece, and she noticed that there was a shiny handle at just the right height for her to reach without stretching. The latch looked similar to the ones on the doors at home, and her natural curiosity began to override any thoughts of caution or adult warnings about danger. "Maybe I can see the city better from out there," she whispered to Mr. Buttons, glancing back at the adults who remained completely absorbed in their crisis management, like players in a drama where children were invisible. "Just for a minute while Daddy finishes his important work. I'll be very careful, just like when I climbed the big tree in Central Park." Carmen's training as a professional cleaner had taught her to notice details that others missed, to see the small signs that preceded larger problems, and she observed the subtle shift in Grace's body language that preceded action. The child was preparing to try the door handle, and Carmen realized with crystal clarity that she was witnessing the moments before a potential tragedy that would haunt everyone for the rest of their lives. The storm outside had intensified dramatically, with wind gusts now strong enough to rattle the windows and send debris flying past like missiles launched by an angry sky. The balcony, while beautiful in calm weather, had become a dangerous platform buffeted by powerful winds and slick with rain that would make footing treacherous for even the most sure-footed adult. The merger documents are worthless without Mitchell's signature, and every minute of delay costs us credibility we've spent years building, Victoria Sterling declared, her voice rising to compete with the thunder outside that seemed to mock their human concerns. "We need to contact his driver, his bodyguard, his personal assistant, someone who can physically locate him and drag him away from whatever call has him hypnotized." Grace's hand closed around the door handle with the determination of a child who had made up her mind, her small fingers working to understand the mechanism that would grant her access to the outdoor adventure she craved. The latch was more complex than the simple doors at home, but her determination and curiosity provided powerful motivation to solve this mechanical puzzle. Carmen made a split-second decision that would change everything, abandoning years of training about professional boundaries and social hierarchies in favor of something far more fundamental and important. "Sweetheart, wait!" she called out, her voice carrying a note of urgency that cut through the corporate chaos like a lighthouse beam through fog. She abandoned her cleaning cart without a second thought and moved quickly toward Grace, her comfortable shoes silent on the marble floor as adrenaline propelled her forward. Grace paused, her hand still on the door handle, and turned to look at Carmen with curious blue eyes that held the innocent trust of childhood. "I just wanted to see the pretty lights better," she explained innocently, not understanding the danger that lurked beyond the deceptively simple glass barrier, like a monster disguised as beauty. "The storm is very strong out there, pequeña princesa," Carmen said gently, kneeling down to Grace's eye level and speaking with the universal language of maternal concern that transcended cultural boundaries. "It's much safer to watch from inside where it's warm and dry. Would you like to build your castle somewhere more comfortable, maybe near the fireplace where the light is warmer?" For a moment, the entire universe seemed balanced on a knife's edge between tragedy and salvation. Grace's natural childhood impulse to explore warred with the gentle guidance of a caring adult who recognized the hidden dangers that innocence couldn't perceive, while storm winds howled outside like ancient spirits, warning of disaster. The executives continued their frantic phone calls, completely oblivious to the life-and-death drama playing out just yards away from their heated discussions of profit margins and market share. Their world of million-dollar deals and international markets suddenly seemed trivial compared to the simple human moment unfolding between a caring woman and a curious child whose life hung in the balance. Grace looked back at the door, then at Carmen's concerned face, and finally at her beloved teddy bear, who waited patiently in his royal tower like a wise counselor offering silent advice. "Mr. Buttons would probably get wet out there," she said thoughtfully, her child's logic finding the perfect reason to choose safety over adventure. "And he doesn't like baths very much. He always gets grumpy when his fur gets soggy." Carmen smiled with relief that flooded through her like warm sunshine, her heart still pounding from the adrenaline of intervention that had saved a life in 30 seconds of courage. "That's very considerate of you to think about, Mr. Buttons. Perhaps we should move your castle to that comfortable area by the fireplace. It has better light for building, and Mr. Buttons can stay nice and dry while ruling his peaceful kingdom." "Gay," as Carmen gently guided Grace away from the balcony doors with the tenderness of someone who understood the preciousness of childhood innocence. Neither of them noticed the elevator indicator in the hallway beginning to climb toward the 11th floor with mechanical precision. Alexander Mitchell was finally returning to his daughter and his business crisis, completely unaware that his life was about to intersect with an angel disguised as a hotel housekeeper. The storm outside reached its peak intensity, as if nature itself was providing dramatic accompaniment to the moment when two worlds were about to collide in the most unexpected and life-changing way possible. The thunder that followed seemed to announce that nothing would ever be the same again, that this day would be remembered as the moment when courage trumped protocol and love conquered indifference. Grace settled into her new building location, happily reunited with Mr. Buttons and grateful for the kind attention from the nice lady with the gentle voice and caring eyes. She had no idea that her innocent curiosity had just been transformed into a story of heroism that would change lives and reveal truths that had been hidden for far too long beneath layers of wealth and social convention. The blocks of her castle stood strong and steady in their new location, just like the foundation of trust that had been built between a Brazilian housekeeper and an American child in the span of 30 critical seconds. Sometimes the most important construction projects happen in the human heart, built with materials that no money can buy. Compassion, courage, and the willingness to risk everything for someone else's welfare. The elevator doors to the private office area opened with a soft chime that barely registered above the chaos, and Alexander Mitchell stepped into the main penthouse with the purposeful stride of a man accustomed to commanding boardrooms and billion-dollar negotiations. At 38, he possessed the kind of presence that made rooms go quiet. 6 feet 2 inches of perfectly tailored authority, with steel-grey eyes that missed nothing, and dark hair that showed just enough silver at the temples to suggest wisdom earned through years of high-stakes decision-making. His Italian leather shoes clicked against the marble floor as he approached the main living area, already pulling out his phone to check the 17 missed calls that had accumulated during his extended conference call with Tokyo. The semiconductor acquisition had finally been secured, but at the cost of keeping some of New York's most powerful executives waiting for over an hour while they were supposed to be watching his daughter. He straightened his platinum tie clip and prepared to face the inevitable storm of corporate fury. "Daddy!" Grace's voice cut through the ambient tension like sunshine breaking through storm clouds, and Alexander's entire demeanor transformed instantly. The corporate titan melted away, replaced by a father whose face lit up with genuine joy at the sight of his daughter. She ran toward him with the uninhibited enthusiasm that only children possess, her golden curls bouncing as she clutched Mr. Buttons in one arm. Alexander knelt down just in time to catch her in a hug that lifted her off her feet, spinning her around in a moment of pure paternal bliss that stood in stark contrast to the corporate chaos surrounding them. "Princess, I'm so sorry I'm late," he said, his voice soft with the tenderness reserved only for her. "Did you have fun building while Daddy finished his work? I see Mr. Buttons has been taking good care of you." "I built the most amazing castle, Daddy. And the nice lady helped me make it even better." Grace bubbled with excitement, pointing toward Carmen, who stood near the fireplace, professionally arranging fresh flowers but clearly glowing with the warmth of their interaction. Alexander followed his daughter's gesture and noticed the hotel housekeeper for the first time. Carmen had returned to her duties, but there was something different about her posture. A quiet confidence mixed with the satisfaction of someone who had done something meaningful. She was young, perhaps late 20s, with kind eyes and an air of gentle strength that seemed to radiate from her very presence. "The nice lady moved my castle to the best spot by the fireplace," Grace continued, her words tumbling out in the rapid-fire manner of excited children. "She said dragons would make your buildings more interesting, and she thinks Mr. Buttons is a very good king. Oh, and she saved him from getting all wet in the storm." Alexander's attention sharpened at his daughter's innocent revelation. "Saved him from getting wet?" he asked, his business-trained mind immediately detecting that there was more to this story than a simple conversation about toys and imagination. Before Grace could answer, Victoria Sterling's sharp voice cut through their reunion like a blade designed to slice through anything warm or human. "Alexander, finally, do you have any idea what chaos your absence has caused? We've lost millions in the last hour, and the London Consortium is threatening to walk away entirely." The moment was shattered as the reality of corporate crisis crashed back into their bubble of family connection. Alexander stood slowly, his expression shifting back toward business mode, but his hand remained protectively on Grace's shoulder. "I apologize for the delay," he said, his voice carrying the authority of someone accustomed to being the most powerful person in any room. "The Tokyo acquisition required my personal attention, but it's now complete. Shall we proceed with the merger documents?" As the executives began converging on him like sharks drawn to blood, Alexander noticed something that made him pause. Carmen was cleaning nearby, but her movements seemed deliberately positioned to maintain visual contact with Grace. It was subtle, the kind of protective behavior that only a parent would recognize, and it triggered something in Alexander's consciousness. "Grace, sweetheart," he said, crouching back down to her level while the executives waited impatiently. "Tell Daddy exactly what happened with the nice lady and Mr. Buttons." Grace's eyes sparkled with the importance of having her father's complete attention. "Well, I was building my castle near the big windows because the lightning was so pretty, and Mr. Buttons wanted to see outside too. But then the nice lady said the storm was too strong for teddy bears, and she helped us move to the fireplace where it's safer." "Gee." The words hit Alexander like a physical blow. His daughter had been near the balcony doors during the storm, while he was in his office taking a call, trusting that responsible adults would keep her safe. His mind immediately calculated the danger. 15 floors up, hurricane-force winds, a curious 7-year-old, and a simple latch that any child could manipulate. The realization that Grace had been moments away from potential disaster while he was negotiating profit margins made his blood run cold. He looked up at Carmen with new eyes, seeing past the uniform and social divide to the woman who had quite possibly saved his daughter's life while he was trapped in a conference call about profit margins and market share. The weight of that realization settled on him like a mountain. "Ma'am," he said, standing and addressing Carmen directly for the first time, his voice carrying a gravity that made every executive in the room stop their urgent conversations. "Could I speak with you for a moment?" Carmen looked up, startled by the direct attention from the man she had only heard mentioned as the absent, powerful father. There was something in his tone that transcended the usual dynamic between wealthy clients and service staff, a recognition of shared humanity that she hadn't expected. "Of course, sir," she replied, setting down her cleaning supplies and approaching with the careful composure she had learned to maintain in situations that could determine her family's future. Alexander guided her a few steps away from the group, Grace skipping alongside them with Mr. Buttons tucked securely under her arm. The storm outside was beginning to subside, but the emotional tempest inside the penthouse was just beginning to build towards something unprecedented. "Grace tells me you helped her move away from the windows during the storm," Alexander said quietly, his businessman's ability to read people working overtime to understand the situation. "I want to make sure I understand exactly what happened." Carmen felt her heart rate increase, uncertain whether she was about to be praised or reprimanded for overstepping professional boundaries. "Your daughter was playing near the balcony doors, sir. With the storm getting stronger, I thought it would be safer for her to build her castle in a more protected area. I hope I didn't overstep my bounds." The simple, honest explanation hit Alexander with the force of revelation. While he had been focused on acquiring a semiconductor company worth $300 million, a hotel housekeeper had been protecting something infinitely more valuable: his daughter's life. "You absolutely did not overstep," he said, and Carmen was surprised to hear genuine emotion in his voice. "In fact, I think you may have saved her life." The words hung in the air between them, like a bridge spanning two different worlds. Grace looked up at both adults, with the innocent confusion of a child who didn't fully understand the gravity of what had almost happened. "She's a very special little girl," Carmen said softly, her maternal instinct still activated by the memory of danger averted. "She reminds me of my own daughter." "You have a daughter?" Alexander asked, and something in his tone suggested genuine interest rather than polite conversation. "Yes, sir, Isabella. She's 8, living with my mother in Brazil while I work to provide for our future." Carmen's voice carried the weight of sacrifice that only immigrant parents truly understand. Alexander felt something shift inside his chest, a recognition of shared parenthood that transcended wealth, nationality, and social status. Here was a woman who had risked her job to protect his daughter, while simultaneously working to build a better life for her own child thousands of miles away. "Alexander, we really need to proceed with these documents," Richard Blackwood interrupted, his voice tight with the kind of impatience that came from watching millions of dollars hang in the balance. But Alexander barely heard him. He was looking at Carmen with the intensity he usually reserved for analyzing potential business acquisitions, except this time he was seeing something that couldn't be measured in profit margins or quarterly reports. "What are you studying?" he asked Carmen, somehow intuiting that there was more to her story than hotel housekeeping. "Nursing, sir. At the community college. I'm hoping to become a pediatric nurse." Carmen's voice carried the quiet dignity of someone pursuing a dream against significant odds. Alexander nodded slowly, pieces of a larger picture beginning to fall into place in his mind. A woman studying to care for children had just protected his child. A mother separated from her daughter had just demonstrated more genuine concern for Grace than any of the highly paid nannies or caregivers he had employed over the years. The storm outside had passed, but Alexander Mitchell was standing at the center of a personal hurricane that would change everything he thought he knew about success, priorities, and the people who truly matter in life. The silence stretched between Alexander and Carmen for a moment that felt suspended in time, while behind them the corporate executives grew increasingly agitated about the continued delay. But Alexander seemed oblivious to their concerns. His entire focus concentrated on the woman who had just revealed a truth that cut through his carefully constructed world like lightning through darkness. "A pediatric nurse," he repeated slowly, and Carmen could see wheels turning behind his steel-grey eyes. "Someone who dedicates their life to caring for children, working to heal and protect them." "Yes, sir," Carmen replied, uncertain where this conversation was leading, but sensing that something profound was shifting in the atmosphere around them. Alexander turned to watch Grace, who had settled back into building her castle with renewed enthusiasm, completely unaware that the adults were discussing life-changing revelations just feet away. Mr. Buttons sat regally on his tower, overseeing the construction with the patient wisdom of a beloved toy who had witnessed countless childhood adventures. "Grace lost her mother when she was 3, Alexander said quietly, his voice carrying a weight of grief that he rarely allowed others to see. "Cancer. Since then, it's been just the two of us, along with a succession of nannies and caregivers who saw her as a job rather than a person." Carmen felt her heart clench with sympathy, understanding now the poignancy of the little girl who had seemed so eager for genuine adult attention. "I'm so sorry for your loss, sir. In the 3 years since then, do you know how many of those caregivers ever showed the kind of instinctive protection you demonstrated today?" Alexander continued, his tone becoming more intense. "0. Not one person I've paid to care for my daughter has ever shown the natural maternal concern you displayed in those critical moments." The weight of his words settled between them, like a bridge being constructed in real time. Carmen felt something stirring in her chest, a recognition that this conversation was leading somewhere that would change her life forever. "Mr. Mitchell," Victoria Sterling called sharply from across the room, "the markets are closing soon, and we have multiple international partners demanding immediate resolution. We cannot delay these signings any longer." And Alexander held up one hand without turning around, a gesture that commanded instant silence from people accustomed to wielding power themselves. The authority in that simple movement was absolute, reminding everyone present exactly who controlled this room and every decision within it. "Carmen," he said, turning back to her with an intensity that made her feel like the only person in the world, "I'm going to ask you something that might sound insane, but I need you to consider it seriously." She nodded, her heart beating faster, as she sensed that her life was about to take a turn she could never have imagined. "I want to offer you a position as Grace's personal caregiver and tutor, not a nanny, a true guardian who would help raise her, guide her education, and be the maternal influence she's been missing." Alexander's words came out in a rush, as if he was afraid that speaking slowly might give him time to reconsider this monumental decision. Carmen's eyes widened with shock. "Sir, the salary would be 3 times what you make here at the hotel," Alexander continued, his business mind automatically calculating what it would take to make this offer irresistible. "Full health benefits, housing in our 5th Avenue penthouse, and complete funding for your nursing degree at any school you choose. Plus, we would arrange for Isabella to come to New York and live with us." The words hit Carmen like a tidal wave of possibility. Everything she had dreamed of, everything she had sacrificed for, being offered in a single conversation with a man who had known her for less than 10 minutes. "Isabella could attend the same private school as Grace," Alexander added, watching Carmen's face carefully for her reaction. "They're almost the same age. Grace has been asking for a friend, someone who could share her adventures with Mr. Buttons." Carmen felt tears welling up in her eyes as the magnitude of what was being offered washed over her. Not just a job, but a chance to reunite with her daughter while building a career and providing security she had only dreamed of during her loneliest nights in the hotel employee dormitory. "But, sir," she managed to say through her emotion, "you don't really know me. How can you make such an offer based on one interaction?" Alexander smiled, the first genuine smile any of the executives had seen from him all day. "Carmen, in the business world, I'm known for making quick decisions based on limited information. I've built a billion-dollar empire by recognizing value when I see it, and what I see in you is worth more than any deal I've ever made." He paused, looking at Grace, who was now singing softly to Mr. Buttons while arranging her blocks in an intricate pattern that suggested a mind capable of complex creative thinking. "My daughter has had professional caregivers, expensive tutors, and highly credentialed nannies," Alexander continued. "But in 30 seconds, you gave her something none of them ever have: genuine care without expectation of reward. You protected her simply because it was the right thing to do." Carmen looked down at Grace, who seemed to sense the adult conversation, and looked up with bright, hopeful eyes. "It wasn't even a decision, sir. When I saw her near danger, I just acted. Any mother would have done the same." "Exactly," Alexander said, his voice filled with conviction. "Any mother would have. But you're not her mother. You barely knew her, and you risked your job to keep her safe. That tells me everything I need to know about your character." The corporate executives had begun muttering among themselves, their impatience building to dangerous levels as millions of dollars hung in the balance of this unexpected personal drama. But Alexander seemed to exist in a bubble of clarity, focused entirely on the life-changing decision he was proposing. "I need to ask you one more question," he said to Carmen, his tone becoming even more serious. "Do you believe you could love her? Not as an employee caring for her employer's child, but as someone who could help fill the maternal void in her life." Carmen looked at Grace again, remembering the moment of connection they had shared, the innocent trust in those bright blue eyes, the creative spirit that reminded her so much of her own Isabella. The answer came from somewhere deeper than rational thought. "I already do, sir," she said simply. "From the moment I saw her building that castle, something in my heart recognized her as a child who needed protection and love, and when I saw her heading toward danger." She trailed off, emotion making it difficult to continue. Alexander nodded, understanding completely. "Then my offer stands. Take the rest of the day to think about it if you need to, but Carmen, I hope you'll say yes. Grace needs you, and frankly, I think I need you too." The admission surprised them both. Alexander had built his entire adult life around self-sufficiency and emotional control, but something about this woman's genuine humanity was breaking down walls he had spent years constructing. "Alexander!" Richard Blackwood's voice cut through the moment like a chainsaw through silk. "If we don't sign these documents in the next 20 minutes, we're looking at a complete collapse of the European partnerships. The Hong Kong markets have already closed, and London is threatening to withdraw entirely." For the first time since entering the room, Alexander turned his full attention to the business crisis that had been consuming everyone else. But instead of the focused intensity the executives expected, they saw something that shocked them into silence. Alexander Mitchell was smiling with the serene confidence of a man who had just solved the most important equation of his life. "Gentlemen," he said, his voice carrying an authority that made the room go completely quiet, "you're absolutely right. It's time to make the most important decision of the day." He walked over to Grace and knelt down beside her castle, his expensive suit forgotten as he joined her on the floor with Mr. Buttons between them. "Princess," he said softly, "how would you like to have a new friend come live with us? Someone who could help you build even more amazing castles?" Grace's face lit up with excitement. "The nice lady. Her name is Carmen, and she has a daughter named Isabella, who's just a little older than you. Would you like them to become part of our family?" "Yes!" Grace exclaimed, clapping her hands together with pure joy. Then Mr. Buttons would have even more people to rule over in his peaceful kingdom. Alexander stood and turned back to Carmen, who was watching the scene with tears streaming down her face. In that moment, every sacrifice she had made, every lonely night in a foreign country, every dream deferred for her daughter's future, crystallized into this single perfect possibility. "Carmen," Alexander said, extending his hand toward her, "what do you say? Will you help us build something beautiful together?" The storm outside had completely passed, and afternoon sunlight was streaming through the floor-to-ceiling windows, illuminating the penthouse with golden light that seemed to bless this moment of transformation. In the distance, the city sprawled endlessly, full of millions of people pursuing their dreams with varying degrees of success and happiness. But in this room, at this moment, two families were about to become one, proving that sometimes the most valuable acquisitions have nothing to do with money and everything to do with the human heart. Carmen looked at Alexander's extended hand for a moment that felt like the pause between lightning and thunder, while her entire life hung in the balance of a decision that would change everything for her, for Isabella, and for this little girl who had already captured her heart. The golden afternoon light streaming through the windows seemed to illuminate a path toward a future she had never dared to imagine. "Yes," she whispered, then stronger. "Yes, I accept." Their hands met in a handshake that sealed more than an employment agreement. It was the foundation of a new family structure built on mutual respect, shared love for children, and the recognition that the most valuable things in life cannot be purchased or negotiated. Grace let out a squeal of delight and jumped up from her castle, running to embrace both adults simultaneously in a group hug that nearly knocked them over. Mr. Buttons tumbled from his royal perch, but was quickly rescued and incorporated into the celebration, his one remaining eye seeming to wink with approval at this turn of events. "When can Isabella come?" Grace asked, with the impatience of a child for whom waiting was the most difficult task in the world. "Can she bring her toys? Does she like dragons? Mr. Buttons wants to meet her right away." Carmen laughed through her tears, overwhelmed by the sudden shift from loneliness to belonging. "She would love to meet you and Mr. Buttons, sweetie. She's going to be so excited to hear about your peaceful kingdom." Alexander watched this interaction with the satisfaction of a man who had just made the smartest business decision of his career, except this time the currency wasn't money. It was happiness, security, and the promise of a childhood filled with love for his daughter. "Alexander." Victoria Sterling's voice cut through the celebration like a sword through silk. "We need those signatures now, or we're looking at a financial catastrophe that will make headlines around the world." For the first time since returning to the penthouse, Alexander turned his full attention to the business crisis that had been consuming everyone else. But instead of the stress and urgency they expected, the executives saw something that shocked them into momentary silence. Alexander Mitchell looked completely at peace. "You're absolutely right, Victoria," he said, walking over to the conference table with the casual confidence of a man who had just solved every problem that mattered. "It's time to sign some documents and make this official." He picked up the merger agreements and began reviewing them with the speed and precision that had made him one of the most successful businessmen in North America. His pen moved across the pages with decisive strokes, signing documents worth billions of dollars as if they were grocery lists. "There!" he announced, capping his pen with a flourish. "The merger is complete. The semiconductor acquisition is finalized, and Mitchell Industries just became the largest development company on the East Coast." The executives released a collective sigh of relief that seemed to deflate the tension in the room like air leaving a balloon. Phones immediately began buzzing with calls to London, Hong Kong and São Paulo as the news spread across international markets. But Alexander wasn't finished with surprises. "However," he continued, his voice carrying the authority of someone accustomed to commanding absolute attention, "I want everyone to understand that this will be the last time business takes precedence over family in my life." The room went quiet again, unsure how to process this declaration from a man whose entire reputation was built on ruthless business prioritization. "Richard, Victoria, Marcus," Alexander addressed each executive in turn, "you've all worked tirelessly today, and this deal's success is a testament to your dedication. Which is why I'm promoting each of you to full partnerships with complete operational authority over your respective divisions." Stunned silence greeted this announcement. Partnership in Mitchell Industries meant more money and power than any of them had dared to hope for. "This means," Alexander continued, "that future crises can be handled without requiring my personal presence, because from now on, my priority is raising my daughter with the help of the remarkable woman who just joined our family." Carmen felt a fresh wave of emotion at being described as family rather than an employee. The casual way Alexander included her in his future plans made her realize that this was more than a job offer. It was an invitation to help build something meaningful and lasting. "Carmen," he said, turning to her with a smile that transformed his entire face, "we need to make arrangements for Isabella's immigration and schooling. I'll have my legal team handle the paperwork immediately. With expedited processing, we can have her here within 2 to 3 months. And of course, we'll conduct proper background checks as a formality, though I trust my instincts about character." 2 to 3 months? Carmen gasped, hardly able to believe that a reunion she had dreamed about for 3 years could happen so relatively quickly. "Money has its advantages," Alexander said with a wink. "Private jets, expedited visas, and the best immigration lawyers in the country. Isabella will be here before summer ends, and we'll have everything perfectly prepared for her arrival." Grace tugged on Carmen's sleeve with the urgency of a child who had just thought of something important. "Carmen, will you help me prepare Isabella's room? She can have the one next to mine, and we can build a connecting bridge for Mr. Buttons to travel between kingdoms." "Of course, sweetheart," Carmen replied, kneeling down to Grace's level. "We'll make it the most beautiful room a little girl could want. Maybe we can even paint some friendly dragons on the walls." Alexander watched this interaction with the profound satisfaction of a man who had just witnessed his daughter's face light up with genuine happiness for the first time in years. The expensive toys, elaborate birthday parties, and exclusive private school experiences he had provided paled in comparison to the simple joy of having someone who truly cared about her dreams and imagination. "There's one more thing," he said, his tone becoming more serious. "Carmen, I know this is all happening very quickly, and I want you to know that if you ever feel uncomfortable or want to change any aspect of our arrangement, you only need to ask. This has to work for everyone, especially the children." Carmen stood and looked at this man who had just offered her everything she had worked toward for years, simply because she had acted on maternal instinct to protect his daughter. "Mr. Mitchell." "Alexander," he corrected gently. "We're family now." "Alexander," she said, testing the name that represented a complete transformation of her social status. "You've given me more than a job. You've given me the chance to reunite with my daughter while caring for yours. You've offered me educational opportunities I never could have afforded, and you've welcomed me into your family based on 30 seconds of interaction. I don't know how to thank you." "You don't need to thank me," Alexander replied. "You just need to continue being exactly who you are, someone who puts children's welfare above everything else. That's worth more than any amount of money." As if summoned by the mention of money, the executives began gathering their documents and preparing to leave, their crisis finally resolved and their new partnerships offering financial security beyond their wildest dreams. The storm had passed both literally and figuratively, leaving behind a transformed landscape of relationships and possibilities. "Daddy," Grace said, tugging on Alexander's sleeve, "now that Carmen and Isabella are going to live with us, can we build a real castle in Central Park, one big enough for all of us and Mr. Buttons?" Alexander laughed, the sound rich with genuine happiness. "Princess, we can build anything you want. Castles, kingdoms, bridges between worlds, whatever your imagination can dream up." He looked around the penthouse that had been the scene of corporate battles and financial warfare, now transformed into the birthplace of a new family structure built on love, trust, and the simple recognition that some things matter more than market share. Outside, the Manhattan skyline stretched endlessly in all directions, full of millions of people pursuing their dreams with varying degrees of success and happiness. But in this room, 4 lives had just been permanently intertwined by an act of compassion that proved the most valuable investments have nothing to do with money and everything to do with the human heart. Carmen picked up her cleaning supplies for the last time, looking at the cart that had been her constant companion for 3 years. Tomorrow, she would begin a new life as a member of one of New York's most powerful families, but she would never forget the journey that brought her to this moment. Grace carefully packed up her building blocks, making sure Mr. Buttons was secured in his traveling case for the journey home. She chatted excitedly about all the adventures she would share with Isabella, plans that involved castles, dragons, and probably a significant expansion of Mr. Buttons's peaceful kingdom. Alexander finished gathering his documents, but his mind was already focused on the phone calls he needed to make to arrange Isabella's travel, Carmen's educational enrollment, and all the practical details of incorporating 2 new family members into their lives. As they prepared to leave the penthouse together, the billionaire CEO, his daughter, and the hotel housekeeper who had just become their family, the afternoon sun painted everything in golden light that seemed to bless this extraordinary transformation. Sometimes the most important mergers happen not in boardrooms with billion-dollar documents, but in moments of human connection when courage meets compassion and creates something beautiful that money could never buy. Grace had found a new mother figure. Carmen had found her path to reuniting with Isabella, and Alexander had discovered that the most valuable acquisition of his career was learning to prioritize love over profit. The blocks of Grace's castle had been packed away, but the foundation they had built together, trust, protection, and unconditional care, would serve as the cornerstone for a family structure that would last far longer than any business empire. In the end, the most successful construction projects are built not with steel and concrete, but with patience, kindness, and the willingness to risk everything for someone else's happiness. As they walked toward the elevator together, Grace skipping between her father and her new guardian, Mr. Buttons tucked safely under her arm, it was clear that some storms bring destruction, but others clear the way for new beginnings that are more beautiful than anything that came before.